Ladies and gentlemen, this is not just another day in court. Today, the truth will either destroy or salvage what's left of the Brown family. The voice of the judge was like thunder booming through a storm, deep and measured, echoing across the crowded courtroom. The seats were all taken. Journalists jostled one another in the press box. Cameras trained on the front, poised to catch every twitch of feeling. The audience benches creaked under the weight of onlookers who had stood in line before dawn just to get a seat inside. There were some faithful Sister Wives fans, eager to see the raw drama play out unedited, unscripted, without cameras dictating the plot. There were critics, cynics, and former neighbors who had witnessed the Brown family's ascendancy and decline from behind the scenes. But they were all bound by one thing: curiosity. Curiosity about the man who had referred to himself as a leader, a father, a husband, a provider. The man who had worked multiple wives, sired numerous children, and proclaimed he had it all under control. Kody Brown. He sat at the defendant's table now, by himself, his iconic curls neatly tugged back, his jaw clenched, his eyes scanning left and right, but never colliding with the faces they encountered. He sported a dark suit, sharp and creased, as if attire could shield him from the madness thrumming in the air. But despite how hard he worked to appear calm, the reality leaked through: a slight quiver in his hand, the twitch of his lip, the manner in which his foot tapped impatiently under the table. This was not the Kody Brown who marched across television screens, arms spread wide, espousing family cohesion. This was not the man who insisted on being obeyed and respected. No, this was a man naked to the bone, backed into a corner by reality, having to face what he'd kept bottled up for all those years. And opposite them sat the four women who knew him best of all. Christine Brown, once the wife who smiled brightest but left him with the deepest cut, sat with arms folded tightly over her chest. Her lips were pursed into a thin, angry line, her chin lifted in quiet defiance. Her eyes never left Kody, blazing with the fury of years of betrayal. Next to her was Janelle. Where Christine's anger had been a flame, Janelle's was ice, yielding and piercing. She leaned back in her chair, her hands folded in front of her, her eyes locked on Kody as if she was balancing his every breath, every quiver, every possible falsehood he dared utter. Meri Brown was more subdued, her body folded in on itself, a tissue already clenched in the palm of her hand. Her skin was white, her eyes bloodshot, her lips quivering as if she had already cried before she entered the courthouse. She had endured years of sorrow, disillusionment, and isolation, but nothing could have prepared her for the tempest that awaited. And Robyn, Kody's final and favorite wife. She sat alone among them, her back unsure, her eyes frantically flicking toward her husband. She had stood by him, protected him, even to the detriment of relationships with the other wives. But now, even she seemed white and shaken. Her hands writhed in her lap, her breathing shallow, her lips moving as if she prayed silently. The scene of them sitting together, four women who had once shared a home, a husband, a dream, was poignant. Transcended by history, bound together by the courtroom, all of them bore years of tales, complaints, and scars etched out by the same man, and now they were sitting here, not as wives but as witnesses. The gallery strained forward. The air was heavy, like the seconds before a storm, when the sky lightens, and the world holds its breath for lightning to flash. Everyone felt it. Something tremendous was going to occur. The bailiff spoke out of the hush. "All rise." Everyone rose as the judge came in, robes brushing across the waxed floor. The gavel fell once, a harsh crack that even the most courageous winced at. "Be seated." Chairs scraped, feet shuffled, but then silence swept the room again. The judge's gaze swept the courtroom, touching Kody, then the wives, then the jury. Today he spoke deliberately. "We will have the evidence that if true, will forever redefine the way this family is remembered." The gravity of his words weighed upon them like lead. Reporters wrote frantically. Onlookers shared reluctant glances. Even the jury fidgeted in their seats, already privy to the fact that this was no run-of-the-mill trial. Kody's attorney leaned forward, murmuring something, but Kody remained still. His gaze remained trained on the slick wood of the table before him, as if he glared hard enough, he might just vanish into it. Across the aisle, Christine emitted a low snort, loud enough for the closest reporter to overhear. Janelle shook her head, her mouth twisting into something that wasn't quite a smile, but wasn't far from it either. Meri wiped her eyes, resolutely not daring to glance at him at all. And Robyn? Oh, poor Robyn, sat on the very edge of her chair, warring between loyalty and fear. The prosecutor stood, his tie crisp, his face impassive. He was holding a heavy folder in his hand, the weight of which was evident. He laid it down carefully on the table, his fingertips brushing over the cover as if it were an unexploded device. Your Honor, he started. This is not a case about reality TV. It is not a case about celebrity. It is not a case about religion, marriage, or lifestyle. This is a case about truth. A truth which Mr. Kody Brown has concealed from his family, from the public eye, and from the law. A truth that has wrought betrayal, heartbreak, and ruin. And today, he continued, his voice stern, that truth will at last be made known. Gasps moved through the room. The wives tensed in their seats. Kody's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. The tension was intolerable. What truth? What secret? What could it possibly be so dark, so hurtful, that it had brought the entire Brown family into this courtroom? Under the nation's watchful eye, the judge leaned forward, nodding. Proceed. And with that one word, the trial of Kody Brown began in earnest. The gallery tensed, heads leaning forward, hearts racing. The wives steeled themselves. Kody gritted his jaw, a sheen of sweat at his temple. The world waited, because whatever was in that folder was about to destroy everything. The prosecutor's heels clicked on the courtroom floor as he stood up slowly, as though a man with the burden of fate. In his palm a fat folder bulged with papers, its edges frayed, as though it had been opened, read, and jealously protected 100 times before this same instant. He set it down slowly on the table, his fingertips poised on it as if it were a live bomb. The room went quiet. Even the buzzing of the fluorescent lights seemed to dissipate. All eyes were fixed on that folder. Mr. Brown, the prosecutor said, his tone even, biting, deliberate. For years, you presented to the world that your family was founded on faith, love, and trust. But trust, he paused, making the word cut through the air, can be quantified, and sometimes it can be broken. Gasps brushed against the gallery. Reporters bent forward, pens scribbling wildly. Cameras zoomed in on every fleeting glance of emotion on Kody's face. Kody shifted uncomfortably at the defendant's table, his jaw clenched, his lips pursed into a tight line. He tapped his fingers on the table, a nervous beat he couldn't conceal. The prosecutor slowly opened the folder. The first page turned over, the rustle of paper ringing out in the quiet. He held it up to be seen by the court. Exhibit A, financial statements, he declared. Numbers spilled across the projection screen. Bank transfers, withdrawals, mysterious expenses. Christine leaned forward, her face white. What is this? She whispered audibly, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. Janelle's eyes narrowed. She was a practical person, one who was down to earth in money and resources. If anyone knew numbers, it was her. She shook her head, muttering under her breath, those are not family expenditures. Look at the dates. Look at the figures. Meri wrapped her tissue in a tighter grip, her knuckles pale. Deep down, she had always suspected Kody's need for control could mask something sinister, but looking at the numbers, cold, irrefutable evidence, turned her stomach into knots of fear. And Robyn's lips quivered. Her eyes shifted from the monitor to Kody, pleading with him silently to deny it, to rationalize it, to tell her this was some error. But Kody did not glance in her direction. He looked at the table, his jaw working. The prosecutor spoke over the strained moment. Between 2018 and 2023, Mr. Brown deposited more than $2 million into secret accounts. Accounts not in the family trust. Accounts nobody in this courtroom, except for him, had any idea existed. The room exploded. Gasps, murmurs, horrified screams. The judge pounded the gavel. Order! Order in the court. Christine's face reddened. 2 million? She spat, shaking her head in outrage. During the time I was barely making ends meet. During the time I was keeping the kids on my own. Janelle's voice grew, hard and icy. He said there wasn't enough for groceries in some weeks. He said we had to make sacrifices. And the whole time she pointed towards the screen, her voice cracking for the first time. He was keeping millions in secret. The tension doubled again as the prosecutor turned the next page. Property deeds. Exhibit B. Real estate purchases, he announced. On the screen came scanned documents. Titles, signatures, contracts. During the last 5 years, Mr. Brown bought several properties in his corporations and shell names. Arizona land, a cabin in Colorado, even a California beachfront condo. None of these were shared with his family. The wives sat motionless, eyes fixed on the screen. Christine sat back in her chair, arms folded once more, but this time not in reserved rebellion. This time in pure fury. A condo? She snarled. He told me we couldn't even get braces for our daughter. And he purchases a condo? Janelle laughed coldly, though there was nothing funny about it. Of course. Of course there were real estate. He was constructing a new life, while destroying ours. Meri wept openly now, dampening the tissue in her hand. I thought I was crazy, she breathed. I thought I was dreaming when the money didn't balance. He made me think it was my fault, that I wasn't doing well enough. But all along, he was lying. Robyn sat frozen, her lips parted, her hands shaking. For years she had defended him, trusted him, believed in him when the others did not. But these documents, they told a different story. A story she couldn't rewrite. The prosecutor moved forward, holding up a third page. Exhibit C. Late-night wire transfers. Screens came alive once more, flashing transactions for weird hours. Midnight 2 a.m., 3:15 a.m. cash. Going out like water. Always to the same shadowy accounts. Mr. Brown, Prosecutor Karen said sternly, addressing Kody, who were you wiring money to at 3 a.m.? Why were these accounts under false names? And why, after years of leading your family to believe you didn't have money, do these files indicate you were anything but? The wives leaned forward, hearts racing. They glared at Kody, waiting, demanding for answers. But Kody remained silent, his lips clamped together, shoulders tense, eyes fixed on the table. The prosecutor slammed the folder shut, with a resounding crack that sounded like a gunshot. Sire, he stated firmly, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The evidence tells a story of betrayal, deceit, and secret lives. Mr. Brown has concealed millions. And the reality behind these transactions will reveal precisely what type of individual sits before you today. The judge nodded slowly. The court will take this into record. The jury will examine the evidence. But within the courtroom itself, the verdict was already taking shape, in the wives' hearts, in the notebooks of the reporters, in the hushed words that roamed the gallery like smoke. Christine spoke in a shaking voice. You took from us. You took from your own kids. Janelle grumbled through gritted teeth. You were never broke. You were lying every damn day. Meri, shattered and shaking, could only whisper, why Kody? Why? And Robyn, sweet, devoted Robyn, broke at last with the vow she had never meant to make. It's true, isn't it? But Kody remained silent. His silence was a louder denial. And the world began for the first time to perceive him not as a misguided husband, not as a victim of circumstance, but as a man with burdens too great to conceal. The cryptic evidence was merely the initial fissure, but every person in the room understood. When the dam at last did burst, the deluge would carry everything before it. The gavel came down once, abrupt and definitive. The judge leaned forward, eyes scanning the strained courtroom. Call your first witness. The prosecutor nodded, standing up from his chair. He looked over at Kody, who remained still, teeth gritted, before facing the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, our first witness is a man who managed the Browns' finances for more than 10 years. Welcome to the stand, Mr. Richard Callahan. A balding middle-aged man with a nervous stride ambled toward the witness stand. He ducked Kody's eyes, his fingers fluttering, as he raised his hand and took the oath. The prosecutor strode back and forth slowly. Mr. Callahan, inform the court your function in the Brown family's finances. Richard cleared his throat. I was their accountant. I did their taxes, budgets, business investments. I monitored their expenses for years. And in your professional opinion, the prosecutor asked, did anything unusual ever catch your attention? Richard hesitated. His eyes darted to Kody, then to the wives. Christine's glare burned into him, silently urging him to speak. Meri's trembling hands clutched her tissue tighter. Robyn sat rigid, almost as if bracing for impact. Yes, Richard finally admitted. There were irregularities, explain. He breathed unsteadily. Missing money. Transfers I couldn't explain. Initially, I thought it was accounting mistakes. But the sums got bigger. Tens of thousands. All at a time. And always at weird times of the day. When I confronted Kody, he said to leave it alone, that it was family business I'd never grasped. Christine gasped out loud, her hand shooting to her mouth. He said the opposite. She breathed angrily. That the finances were not good. That we all had to make sacrifices. Janelle leaned forward, her eyes flashing. You are saying he lied to all of us? Richard bent his head. Yes. The prosecutor nodded grimly. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. He faced the jury. This isn't speculation. This isn't rumor. These are the words of the man who handled their money, who watched the transfers with his own two eyes. The gallery hummed with stunned whispers. Reporters wrote furiously. Cameras snapped. The judge held up his hand. Order in the court. But the tempest was just getting started. Next witness. The prosecutor declared. A tall, middle-aged man walked into the courtroom. His step steady, but his face a picture of unease. He was dressed in a black jacket, his eyes veiled with something more serious than nervousness. State your name. Samuel Torres. And your connection to the defendant. Samuel shifted restlessly. We were friends. Or I thought we were. Tell the court what you saw. The silence that followed was oppressive, almost choking. Samuel's voice dropped low. I saw him. Multiple times. Late at night. Parking lots. Empty restaurants after closing. He wasn't alone. He was meeting someone. A ripple of shock tore through the courtroom. Meri's eyes widened, tears spilling down her cheeks. Christine shook her head furiously. Janelle muttered. Unbelievable. Robyn's lips parted in horror. The prosecutor leaned in. Who was he meeting? Mr. Torres. Samuel swallowed hard. I don't know. A woman, always the same one. They'd talk for hours. Sometimes shouting. Sometimes laughing. Once I saw him give her an envelope. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, shouts, murmurs. The judge thumped his gavel. Again and again. Order, order. Christine's voice cut through the din. All those nights. He said he was working late. He was with her? Janelle's hands trembled. He guilt-tripped me into doubting myself. He made me think I was paranoid. Meri covered her face with her tissue, silently crying. Robyn's fingers strained around the edge of the bench. White-knuckled. The prosecutor's tone sliced like steel. Mr. Torres, why did you wait so long to come forward? Samuel's face contorted with shame. Because he threatened me. He said if I ever opened my mouth, he'd destroy me. I thought he meant it. The jury looked at each other uncomfortably. The wives glared at Kody, their faces a cyclone of fury and devastation. And Kody? He sat impassively, staring at the table, refusing to meet anyone's eye. Thank you, Mr. Torres, said the prosecutor firmly. No further questions. The tension in the courtroom boiled over. But the prosecution wasn't done. One more witness, Your Honor. The doors opened again. And this time a woman entered. Her heels clicked on the tile. Sharp and confident. She was a former business partner of Kody's. Madeline Jones. She took the stand with calm precision, her eyes cool as ice. Miss Jones. The prosecutor began. Tell the court what you know. Madeline tilted forward, her tone crisp. I have worked with Kody on multiple business transactions. Property. Investments. He would inform his family that the deals were for them. But the reality is, they were not. Gasp was heard once again. Madeline went on broken. He diverted money into private accounts. He informed me flat out that the family didn't have to know, that it was his prerogative as the head of the household. One time, I asked him if he wasn't afraid of getting caught. And do you know what he told me? She addressed the jury directly. He said, "They'll never leave me. They'll never know." The courtroom fell silent. Totally, absolutely silent. Christine's face white, then burning red with rage. Janelle's lips parted in shocked dismay. Incredulity etched on her face. Meri hung her head, softly whispering through tears. "How could you?" Robyn clapped a hand over her mouth, her shoulder shaking. They had trusted him for years. They had believed in his words, his lies. And now, before the world, witness after witness destroyed that trust, laying it brick by crumbling brick. The prosecutor turned to the jury, his voice thunderous. "You've heard it from the accountant. You've heard it from a friend. You've heard it from his own business partner. This is not rumor. This is a pattern. A web of lies spun by the man who sat before the cameras and told the world he was a man of faith and family. But behind closed doors, he was someone very different." The judge's gavel came down again. "This court will take recess." No one stirred immediately. However, the wives remained motionless. The gallery filled with murmurs. The reporters scrambled for the doors, ready to announce the explosive testimonies. And at the defendant's table, Kody Brown remained stiff, lips clamped tight, eyes fixed on something that was not there. Because the witnesses had testified. The cracks in his armor were no longer cracks, fractures, wide and inescapable. And everyone in that room knew. The worst was yet to come. The courtroom hummed like a threatened hive. Journalists whispered feverishly into phones. Pens scribbled paper with mad haste. And the crowd was alive with stifled gasps and low mutterings. The judge had demanded order. But shock waves of the previous testimonies were impossible to suppress. Kody Brown sat rigid in his chair, his knuckles clenched white as they grasped the table. For hours he'd sat through blow after blow. Secret meetings, financial fraud, betrayal exposed by his own associates and friends. And all the while he'd remained silent, his mouth clamped into a thin line. But now, as the judge was getting ready to resume after recess, the quiet weighed on him like a stone. He could sense the eyes of the jury, the wives, the cameras. The whole world was waiting, watching to know if he would finally crack at last. The gavel came down. Court is back in session. The prosecutor stood, voice firm and crisp. "Your Honor, prior to proceeding, we ask that the defendant take the stand." The gallery exploded. Reporters almost tumbled out of their seats. Christine gasped, her eyes flashing with rage and expectation. Janelle sat up straighter, her jaw clenched. Meri gripped her tissue, shaking. Robyn whispered, "No, no, don't," as if imploring him to decline. Kody's attorney leaned close, whispering harshly in his ear. But Kody shook him off, his chest rising and falling like a man on the edge of a cliff. Slowly, almost theatrically, he stood. "I'll speak," he said hoarsely. A hush swept over the courtroom. Even the judge's face tightened, surprised by the bold move. The bailiff took him to the witness stand. Kody held up his right hand, took the oath, and settled into the chair. His gaze swept across the room. Each of his wives, the jury, the prosecutor. The prosecutor moved forward. "Mr. Brown, the court has heard the testimony of your accountant, your business partner, and your own friend. They've testified against you, accusing you of concealing money, of deceit, of living a double life. Do you have any denial?" Kody's jaw clenched. "They don't know the whole story." Christine gave a hard, bitter laugh. "Whole story? You deceived us for years." The judge rapped the gavel. "Mrs. Brown, rein in yourself." But the harm was done. The tension split wide open like a crack of thunder. Kody pushed forward, his words vibrating higher. "Yes, I moved funds. Yes, I withheld things from you. But you believe it was for me. You believe I like to bear the burden of this household, when all of you critiqued, questioned, and left me." His words reverberated across the room. The wives were suspended in silence, their faces ashen. The prosecutor didn't blink. So you're admitting it. Kody scowled. I did what I needed to do. Do you have any idea what it's like to keep 4 marriages, 18 kids, and a dying empire together under the microscope of the world? Nobody else in this room has any idea what that kind of pressure is like. So yeah, I made decisions that you don't get. Christine leapt to her feet. Decisions? Stealing from your own family a decision. Janelle's eyes flared. You led us to think we were the issue. You led us to question ourselves. When you were the one doing all the lying. Meri sobbed hard, her voice breaking. You said I wasn't good enough. Kody, that's why you withdrew from me. But it was never about me. Wasn't it? It was about your secrets. And then Robyn, once his most faithful, spoke. Her voice quivering. You vowed to me that you trusted no one but me. But if that was so, why didn't you so much as tell me? The words strike like a hammer. For the first time, Kody's mask slips. His face contorts. Not in rage, but something more akin to desperation. I was defending you. He barked, turning to Robyn. I did not want you brought into this mess. But the prosecutor seized on it. Defending her or defending yourself. Because from where the jury is sitting, it appears that you wanted to control things. You wanted power. And when the truth undermined that power, you silenced it. Kody's fingers clenched the rim of the witness box. Knuckles white. You think you know me? You think these people? He nodded toward the witness seats. Get what I've given up. They don't, none of them do. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Brown, respond directly. Kody's chest rose and fell, his eyes shooting between the wives. The jury, the prosecutor. The burden of each stare pushed him further back into his chair. And then silence. It hung heavy and long, the sort that made each breath sound like thunder. Finally, Kody broke his silence. His voice deep, nearly a whisper. Perhaps I lost control. Perhaps I thought if I had the money, if I kept them under my secrets, then I could keep this family together. But it wasn't enough. Was it? Christine's expression grew cold. No, Kody. It was never about keeping us together. It was always about you. The gallery gasped once more. But this time not in shock. This time due to the stark reality, lingering in the air. The prosecutor took advantage. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you just heard it from the defendant himself. He admits to concealment of funds. He admits to secrecy. And even now he cannot provide one piece of evidence that his behavior was for anyone else other than himself. The wives sat frozen in disbelief. Even Robyn, his final support pillar, glanced away, her cheeks white with betrayal. Kody slumped in the chair, his bravado waning like a guttering flame. For the first time, he seemed less like a patriarch, less like the head of a family dynasty, and more like what he really was. A man backed into a corner by his own decisions. The judge slammed the gavel. This court will adjourn until tomorrow, when closing arguments will commence. But still no one budged. Christine glared at him, anger and despair struggling in her eyes. Janelle's lips were thin, her silence even more vocal than words. Meri sobbed aloud, all those years of hurt spilling across her tissue. Robyn was rigid, a figure of shock. And Kody finally bent his head. Because in that instant all those people in the courtroom knew. The tension had burst. The truth was no longer hiding in the wings. It was here, indomitable, overwhelming him before the eyes of the world. The courthouse loomed imposingly in the morning light, its stone facade casting long shadows in the street. There were crowds on the sidewalk, a buzz like hornets. Shouts were made into cameras by reporters. News vans occupied the sidewalks, and fans of sister wives supported the wives with signs, mocked Kody with derogatory signage. Inside, the court was charged. All the benches were occupied. People in the audience were leaning forward, not able to catch their breath. The wives sat down, Christine with her arms crossed and tight, Janelle quiet but brewing, Meri dainty with her tissue already dampened, and Robyn white, shaking her hands clasped together in her lap. Kody came in last. His characteristic swagger was missing. His suit bagged as if it did not fit anymore. His curls lost their luster. His eyes rimmed with lack of sleep. He moved like a man walking to his own death. The judge arrived, gavel falling once. All rise. The jury came in, faces unexpressive. The air was stifling. Be seated. The judge scanned the room. Members of the jury, have you reached a verdict? The foreman rose, gripping the paper that held Kody's destiny. The silence was so intense that each rustle of paper, each inhale, echoed like thunder. Yes, Your Honor, we have. The clerk accepted the slip, opened it, and read aloud. In the issue of financial misconduct, hiding of funds and violation of trust, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kody Brown. Hearts pounded in the gallery. Christine's nails were deep in her arms. Janelle's lips were pressed thin. Meri squeezed her tissue into shreds. Robyn breathed under her breath. Please, no. Guilty, the courtroom erupted. Gasp, shout, reporters scrambling to send reports. The gavel crashed manically. Order, order in this court. But the commotion only became more deafening. Some of the audience members applauded. Others screamed out in horror. Journalists ran for the exits to send breaking news. Reality TV star, Kody Brown guilty. Kody was stunned, as if the word hadn't yet caught up with him. His mouth opened, closed, reopened. His fists clenched the table, shaking. No. No, this can't. Christine stood up, her face aflame. It's over, Kody. You can't keep hiding. Janelle spoke acidly. This is what happens when the lies finally catch up. Meri dissolved into tears. The tissue in her trembling hands wadded and crumpled. Years of hurt and deception spilled out of her in waves. And Robyn just fell apart in tears, her shoulders spasming wildly. You promised me, Kody. You swore none of this was true. Kody whirled to her, desperation breaking his voice. I did it for you, Robyn. For us. Don't you see? I was trying to protect us. Robyn denied him. Her face turned away, refusing to look at him. The judge's gavel came down once more, stilling the commotion. Mr. Brown, you have been found guilty. Sentencing to be decided at a future date. Until then, you are remanded into custody. Two bailiffs approached. Kody sat bolt upright, his voice breaking. No, you can't do this. I built this family. I sacrificed everything for them. The wives' faces, however, told the truth. There was no family left to claim. Christine stared at him, her tone slicing like a blade. You didn't build us, Kody. You broke us. Janelle's voice came next, strong and steady. And now you've finally broken yourself. Meri couldn't speak past her tears. But the expression on her face, the expression of a woman who had loved and lost and persevered, told 1,000 times more than any words could. And Robyn, shaking, breathed the final blow. You were supposed to guard me, but you destroyed me instead. The bailiffs held Kody by the arms. He struggled, his voice bursting into a wild cry. You're all ungrateful. You needed me. Without me, none of you exist. The gallery erupted once more, gasping at what he said. Christine snapped back with lightning speed. No, Kody, without you, we finally get to be. The judge's gavel came down. Take him away. The bailiffs grabbed Kody and headed for the door. His feet pulled back, his eyes crazed. This isn't over. I'll tell the real truth. I'll expose all of you. But nobody heard him. His words were lost in the din of the gallery, the burst of cameras, the shouts of reporters sprinting out. The courtroom was left with the wives. 4 women tethered by common suffering, but unencumbered by one verdict. Christine finally relaxed, the blaze in her eyes easing. For the first time in years, she felt lighter. Janelle breathed out, steady, determined. A gentle strength emanated from her, the strength of a woman who had been manipulated and emerged unscathed. Meri dried her tears, her face streaked, but her countenance firmer. There was sadness, yes, but also a glimmer of peace. And Robyn remained motionless, shattered, mouthing to herself. I didn't know. The judge adjourned the court, The benches suddenly emptied in a torrent of commotion and motion. But the wives didn't budge immediately. They sat all together, apart for decades of disunity, but here united in survival. Outdoors, word spread like fire. Kody Brown's empire collapses in courtroom showdown. Polygamy patriarch guilty in explosive trial. Brown wives finally break free. The world got its tale. But within the hearts of the women, the verdict was deeper. It wasn't guilt or innocence. It was closure. Christine at last turned toward the others. It's over. He can no longer hurt us. Janelle nodded, her gaze firm. We go forward now. Without him. Meri spoke softly, her voice shaking but resolute. Perhaps now, we can finally heal. And Robyn, wiping her tears, whispered, then I'll have to learn how to live without the lies. They rose together, 4 women once divided by one man, now bound by freedom from him. And as they walked out of the courtroom, past the flashing cameras and the roaring crowd, they didn't look back, because Judgment Day had arrived. And Kody Brown's truth had finally destroyed him.